So the most important file types that we see here are DT project, the project file. That's what this one is, the data transformation project. The project file contains a list of all of the packages in a project. And if you remember from chapter 1, the package is the unit of work. It's what an SSIS developer's output is. You create a package, you execute a package. So then a package has a DTSX, I'm sorry about that. A package has a DTSX extension. So we could just tell by looking inside this project folder, there's only a single package inside it. And if we were to take a look in the DT proj, again, I can open it with a text editor, a notepad if that's all you have. You could see this is actually an XML file, and we can see the product version that we're working with. We can see the database, we can see configurations, and sure enough, here is the enumeration of all of the DTS packages in this project, and there, in fact, here is only a single DTS package, package.dtsx. So yet another configuration file. This one just happens to be in XML format. So I can close this out and go back to creating my first package. And what we're dealing with now is an empty environment, an empty package. So we have actually loaded up. The Solution Explorer shows that we have the project, SSIS project. Now, it's unfortunate it doesn't show the full solution view here, but we actually we are in a solution. It's a little strange. You can see it up here in the top that we actually have first SSIS solution. Okay, but unfortunately over here in the Solution Explorer, you only see the project. And we can tell by this icon here that this is an SSIS project. So if we had multiple projects here, you would be able to see. Now I will show you. Again, the goal of this is not to become ultra comfortable with Visual Studio. It's about creating your first package, right? I'm going to show you a little bit later in this chapter. In fact, the last video in this chapter is how to get comfortable with solutions with multiple projects, packages with projects with multiple packages. We'll talk later on about getting more comfortable with moving the windows around. All stuff that's cool and necessary, but this video and the next video is just about creating that very first package. So what we've done, just a reminder, we created a brand new integration services project, right? At the end of it, Visual Studio left us in this state. We've got the toolbox over here, we've got the package.dtsx, and it says design. So we are in package design mode. Okay. So this is actually called the designer surface. And what we do is this is really sort of a WYSIWYG, if you will. You probably are familiar with that term, but just in case, if somebody hasn't heard the term WYSIWYG, it is what you see is what you get. Okay? A WYSIWYG. Okay? So in other words, you drag and drop, and how you see it laid out here is what you're actually going to see executed by the engine. So back over here. Now, excuse me, the toolbox. If you don't see the toolbox, like if yours looks like this, you can go up to View, and you're going to be taking a look at the toolbox here. This is going to be very, very important because you're going to be dragging and dropping from this toolbox onto the designer surface. So, for example, we might have, I'm just trying to think of some simple things that we can do that wouldn't require a whole lot of logic, and that if you wanted to, you could follow along at home. I could take, for example, a data flow task. So the data flow task is arguably the most important task because it is the foundation of which most of your packages will be built upon. You remember our discussions in chapter 1 of ETL, where you are extracting, transforming, and loading between the sources and destinations? Well, you're going to do most of that work inside of a data flow task. Data flow is how you move from point A to point B. So we are in the control flow view. And the control flow view allows us to decide which comes first. So we could do things like send an email, and we can actually define control flow. We can say that when this task is finished, notice it's got a little handler I can drag, I want it to do a send mail. And I have control. I can right click on this little connector, and I can say that the send mail doesn't happen unless the data flow task ends successfully. And so you could actually rename this, so I now can say success. And then I might have multiple, and so notice I can drag these around. And then I might have another send mail. And when I click on this task, again, I get that little drop down. And we'll cover the full-blown, real live technical names of all of this much later in chapters 3 and 4. But now I would change this one to on failure. And so I could now say on failure. And so now we have a little bit of control flow. When the data flow task, notice that it resizes those little connectors as you move it around. So depending on what happens with the data flow, it's going to either go to success or going to go to failure. Now, logically speaking, there was another one of these, the completion. Completion is just saying, I don't care whether it was success or failure. I always want this to happen. Right? So I could have had something else to put in here. Now, just to get you visually familiar, the little red with the white X, it means that something is wrong with this particular task. Okay, so remember that the whole thing is called a package, and these are our individual tasks. So here's a task, here's a task, here's a task. Okay? And in fact, the toolbox is nothing but a whole big list of tasks, right? Task, 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 etc. So these are all the various tasks. So think of a package as the unit of work for the SSIS engine. But then inside of a package are a set of tasks that get executed according to whatever precedence constraints that we've set up. Like here, this task will not get executed unless that task ended successfully. So there's an order of precedence related. So now, coming back, I'm going to go to the view. I think I closed this earlier. You probably have this Solution Explorer. If things get a little harried and you don't have enough space, like I'm only on a 1024 resolution system, then you can unpin and you get a little more, you can pin. Kind of towards the end of this video, I'll go through some of the tips for dragging and dropping and configuring the Visual Studio. But so the package now, I could right click on this package and execute. And it would just run the whole package. It wouldn't run just one task. It would run the entire package. However, while I'm here inside of the designer, I can right click on a particular task and just execute that solitary task. And I don't care whether this one ends successfully or fails, it would have not gone on and executed the other task. You are just allowed to simply isolate a particular task. Great for debugging, great for setting up certain things that need to be done later on. But generally speaking, we would execute the entire package as a whole. Right? That's actually probably pretty rare to execute the task unless you're in the design phase of working with SSIS here. Okay, so this is the basic outline of what we work with. Now we have these other tabs up here. I think by far you're going to spend the bulk of your time, certainly as a newbie, between control flow and the data flow. So I'll tell you what we'll do. Let's stop here. Let's come back in the next video and talk about the difference between control flow and data flow. And then let's actually set up some data movement.